The snowflake that landed on Hannah Jennings's cheek felt like a tiny knife, cold and sharp, reminding her that nature cared nothing for her grief or her survival. She stood at the edge of the frozen creek bed, staring at the 3 crude wooden crosses she had hammered into the ground just days before, her hands still blistered from the work. The January wind howled through the Utah Territory landscape, whipping her thin shawl around her shoulders as she wondered how much longer she could endure this unforgiving winter of 1878. Her husband Thomas lay beneath the leftmost cross, taken by fever just after Christmas. Their twin boys, Michael and Matthew, barely 6 years old, rested beside him, victims of the same merciless illness that had swept through their small homestead like an invisible reaper. Hannah had nursed them, prayed for them, begged God to spare at least one of them, but the fever had been relentless. Now she stood alone on 40 acres of frozen land, with provisions running dangerously low and no neighbors within 10 miles. The blizzard had started 2 days ago, a monster of wind and ice that refused to relent. Hannah had been rationing what little food remained in the cabin, some dried beans, a handful of cornmeal, and half a slab of salted pork. The chickens had stopped laying weeks ago, and the cow had died during the first cold snap in November. She was 23 years old, and for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to feel truly hopeless. She turned back toward the cabin, her boots crunching through snow that reached past her ankles. The structure looked pitifully small against the vast white landscape, smoke barely trickling from the chimney because she was conserving wood. Every log burned was one less she had for the long weeks ahead. Thomas had planned to cut more timber in the fall, but then the fever came, and all their plans turned to ash. Inside the cabin, Hannah removed her shawl and hung it on the peg by the door. The single room felt cavernous now, empty of the laughter and noise that had once filled it. She avoided looking at the corner where the boys had slept, their small blankets still folded neatly on the narrow bed. Her own bed, the one she had shared with Thomas, seemed impossibly large now, a cold expanse of loneliness that she dreaded each night. She moved to the fireplace and added one precious log to the dying flames, then stirred the pot of thin bean soup that was meant to last her 3 more days. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. She had grown accustomed to hunger over the past weeks, the constant gnawing that never quite went away. The wind screamed around the cabin walls, finding every crack and gap in the chinked logs. Hannah wrapped herself in a blanket and sat in the rocking chair Thomas had made for her as a wedding present 4 years ago. She picked up the shirt she had been mending, but her hands were too cold to work the needle properly. She set it aside and simply stared into the fire, watching the flames dance and wondering if this was how her story would end, alone and forgotten in a frozen wilderness. That night, as she lay beneath every blanket she owned, Hannah heard something that made her heart race with fear. Through the howling wind came another sound, a rhythmic thumping that grew louder. Hoofbeats. Someone was riding through the blizzard, which seemed like madness. She sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest, and listened. The hoofbeats stopped just outside her cabin. A heavy knock rattled the door. "Hello in there. Need shelter from the storm." Hannah hesitated. A woman alone could not be too careful, but what kind of monster would she be to leave someone outside in this weather? She rose, her legs shaky from cold and weakness, and approached the door. "Who are you?" "Name's Beckett Xavier, madam. I'm a ranch hand, got separated from my outfit in this damn blizzard. Begging your pardon for the language, but I'm about frozen solid out here. I mean you no harm, just need to get warm and wait out this storm." His voice sounded genuine, strained with cold and exhaustion. Hannah made her decision and lifted the wooden bar from the door. When she pulled it open, a blast of icy wind nearly knocked her backward, and with it came a snow-covered figure leading an equally snow-covered horse. "There's no barn," Hannah said quickly, "but you can bring the horse inside. There's room." The man did not argue. He led the large bay gelding through the door, and Hannah pushed it closed behind them, dropping the bar back into place. The sudden absence of wind felt like a blessing, though snow now covered her floor in clumps. By the firelight, Hannah got her first good look at her unexpected guest. Beckett Xavier was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean build beneath his heavy coat. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair plastered to his head from the snow and sharp blue eyes that quickly took in the small cabin. His face was ruddy from the cold, his lips nearly blue, and he shivered violently. "Much obliged, madam," he managed through chattering teeth. "Thought I was done for out there." "Get those wet clothes off," Hannah said, her practical nature overriding any awkwardness. "You will catch your death. There's a blanket here." She handed him one of her spares, then busied herself with the horse, rubbing the animal down with an old towel while Beckett stripped off his frozen coat, vest, and outer shirt. The horse was in bad shape, its flanks heaving and covered in ice. Hannah found a bucket and melted some snow in it over the fire, letting the animal drink slowly. It was a fine horse, well built and clearly well cared for before this disaster. "Your family?" Beckett asked, nodding toward the 2 small beds and the larger one. "Dead," Hannah said simply. "Fever took them 2 weeks ago." She saw the sympathy flash across his face, but he had the good sense not to offer empty condolences. "I'm sorry, you out here alone?" "Yes." "You got enough provisions?" Hannah did not answer, which was answer enough. She stirred the pot of soup and made a decision. "Are you hungry?" "Starving, but I don't want to take your food." "You will eat," she said firmly. "I will not have you die in my cabin. That soup needs to be finished anyway." It was a lie, but it made her feel less like she was giving away food she desperately needed. She ladled out generous portions into 2 bowls, keeping hers smaller when he was not looking. They sat at the small table and Beckett ate with the desperate hunger of a man who had not seen food in too long. Hannah ate slowly, making each spoonful last, and studied him between bites. "You said you got separated from your outfit," she asked. Beckett nodded, swallowing. "I'm working for the Riverside Ranch, about 30 miles northwest of St. George. We were moving a herd to winter pasture when this storm hit. It came up so fast, and in the confusion I got turned around. Been riding for 2 days trying to find my way back, but I could not see more than 10 feet in any direction." "St. George is a long way from here," Hannah said. "How far?" "About 15 miles south. This is the northern edge of the territory. There's not much out here except homesteads like this one, and most of them are abandoned now." "Why'd you folks settle so far out?" Hannah felt the familiar pang of grief. "Thomas, my husband, he wanted land of his own. Thought we could make a go of it, raise cattle, grow crops. It was hard, but we were managing. Then winter came early and everything fell apart." The wind hammered against the cabin walls and both of them instinctively looked toward the door. The fire crackled, but even with the extra log, the cold pressed in from all sides. "You cannot stay here alone," Beckett said after a moment. "Not through the rest of winter. You will not make it." "I know," Hannah admitted. "But I have nowhere to go. No family left, no money for passage anywhere. This land is all I have, and it is not worth anything in this condition. Come to St. George with me when the storm breaks. There are people there, a church, families who would help you. You could find work, maybe as a seamstress or a cook. Anything would be better than freezing to death out here." Hannah wanted to argue, to defend her home and her husband's dream, but she was too tired and too cold to lie to herself anymore. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Let us survive this storm first." They finished their meal in silence, and then Hannah showed Beckett where he could sleep on the boy's bed. She gave him extra blankets and kept some for herself, then retreated to her own bed. The presence of another person in the cabin felt strange, both comforting and unsettling. She listened to his breathing gradually slow and deepen as he fell asleep, and only then did she allow herself to cry softly into her pillow. The storm raged for 3 more days. During that time, Hannah and Beckett fell into a careful routine. They took turns feeding the fire, rationed the dwindling food supply, and cared for the horse. Beckett proved to be handy around the cabin, fixing a loose board here, restuffing a gap in the chinking there. He did not talk much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful and kind. Hannah found herself watching him when he was not looking. There was something solid about him, something dependable that reminded her a little of Thomas, but different too. Beckett moved with a quiet confidence, and despite the desperate situation, he never seemed to panic or lose hope. When she mentioned this on the 3rd day, he smiled for the first time since arriving. "My pa always said worrying was like a rocking chair. Gives you something to do but does not get you anywhere. I learned early on to focus on what I can control and let the rest go." "That sounds like a peaceful way to live," Hannah said, kneading the last of the cornmeal into a rough bread. "It has served me well enough, though I will admit I was pretty scared out there in that storm. Could not see where I was going, could not feel my hands or feet. Started thinking about all the things I wish I had done different in my life." "Like what?" Hannah asked, surprised by her own curiosity. Beckett was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "I spent too much time drifting, I think. I'm 26 years old, and I have been working ranches since I was 15. Saved up a fair amount of money, but I never really settled anywhere. Never let myself get close to people, because I always figured I would be moving on soon anyway. Seemed like the safe thing to do, but when I thought I was going to die out there, I realized I had not really lived much either." His words struck Hannah deeply. She had lived, had loved Thomas and her boys with her whole heart, and now that they were gone, the pain was nearly unbearable. But would she trade those years to avoid this grief? Never. "It is better to have loved and lost," she said softly, "than never to have loved at all. That is what they say anyway." "You believe that?" "I have to," Hannah said. "Otherwise, what was the point of any of it?" On the 4th morning, Hannah woke to an unusual sound: silence. The wind had finally stopped. She rose quickly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, and went to the door. When she opened it, the world outside was transformed. Snow covered everything in deep drifts, sparkling in the weak winter sunlight like a field of diamonds. The sky was clear and painfully blue, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Beckett came to stand beside her, looking out at the transformed landscape. "We should leave today," he said. "If another storm comes through, we might not get another chance." Hannah knew he was right. She had maybe 2 days of food left, and that was if she stretched it impossibly thin. "I need to say goodbye," she said. She bundled up in every piece of warm clothing she owned and made her way through the deep snow to the creek bed. The 3 crosses were nearly buried, but she cleared them off with her hands, heedless of the cold. She stood there for a long time, talking to Thomas and the boys in her mind, telling them she was sorry for leaving but that she had to survive. She promised she would never forget them, would carry them in her heart forever. When she returned to the cabin, her face was wet with tears that had frozen on her cheeks. Beckett had already packed what little she owned into 2 bundles, and he had fashioned a crude travois that the horse could pull. "I can walk," Hannah protested. "I am strong enough. In snow this deep." We would not make 5 miles before dark. You ride, I will lead the horse. It is not up for debate." His tone was firm but not unkind, and Hannah was too exhausted to argue. She climbed onto the horse's back, settling herself as comfortably as she could while Beckett arranged the bundles on the travois. Then he took the reins and started walking, breaking trail through the snow. The journey was brutal. The snow was thigh-deep in places, and even though Beckett was strong, he tired quickly. They stopped frequently to rest, and Hannah insisted on walking during some of the easier stretches to give both him and the horse a break. The temperature was well below freezing, and despite all their layers, the cold seeped into their bones. They saw no one else all day. The landscape was empty and white, an endless expanse of snow-covered sage and pinyon. Hannah tried not to think about what would happen if they got lost, or if another storm came up. She focused instead on the rhythm of the horse's steps, the crunch of snow, the steady determination in Beckett's shoulders as he forged ahead. As the sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, they crested a small rise and saw smoke in the distance, several plumes of it rising from chimneys. "St. George," Beckett said, and Hannah heard the relief in his voice. They reached the outskirts of town just as darkness fell. St. George was not large, maybe 300 people, but to Hannah it looked like a metropolis after weeks of isolation. Lanterns glowed in windows, and she could hear voices, the sounds of normal life that seemed almost foreign now. Beckett led them to a modest building with a sign that read, "St. George Hotel." He helped Hannah down from the horse, and she nearly collapsed when her feet hit the ground. Her legs had gone numb from the cold and the long ride. "I have got you," Beckett said, wrapping an arm around her waist to steady her. Together they stumbled inside, where blessed warmth enveloped them like a hug. The woman behind the desk, a plump matron with kind eyes, took one look at them and sprang into action. "Good Lord, you two look half frozen. Samuel, go fetch the doctor. You there, help me get them by the fire." Everything became a blur after that. Hannah was led to a chair near a roaring fireplace and someone wrapped her in blankets. Hot tea appeared in her hands and a bowl of stew. She ate mechanically, feeling the warmth slowly return to her body. Across from her, Beckett was receiving similar treatment, though he kept glancing over at her as if to make sure she was all right. A doctor arrived, an older man with spectacles and a no-nonsense manner. He examined them both, declared them miraculously free of frostbite, and prescribed rest, food, and warmth. The hotel matron, who introduced herself as Mrs. Pamela, insisted they stay the night at no charge. "We take care of our own here," she said firmly. "And anyone who survives what you two just went through deserves a warm bed and a hot meal." Hannah tried to thank her, but the words came out in a sob. The reality of everything, the loss of her family, the desperate journey, the kindness of strangers, all of it crashed over her at once. "Mrs. Pamela made soothing sounds and helped her to a small room upstairs, where a real bed with clean sheets awaited. Hannah fell into it and was asleep almost instantly. She woke the next morning disoriented, unsure for a moment where she was. Then it all came back, and she sat up slowly, her body aching in places she had forgotten existed. Sunlight streamed through the window, and she could hear the sounds of the town waking up. Horses, wagons, people calling to each other. Someone had left a basin of water and a clean dress on the chair. The dress was simple but well made, a dark blue wool that would be warm and practical. Hannah washed as best she could and changed, leaving her old clothes in a heap. She braided her long brown hair, pinched her cheeks to bring some color back, and went downstairs. The dining room was full of people eating breakfast, and the smell of bacon and fresh bread made her stomach growl loudly. Beckett was already there, sitting at a table by the window, and he stood when he saw her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle," Hannah admitted. "But alive. That counts for something." He smiled, and she noticed how different he looked, cleaned up and rested. His dark hair was neatly combed, and without the coating of snow and exhaustion, she could see the strength and intelligence in his face. He was, she realized with a small start, quite handsome. They sat together and ate a breakfast that tasted like heaven. Eggs, bacon, potatoes, fresh bread with butter, and hot coffee. Hannah ate until she was uncomfortably full, making up for weeks of deprivation. Mrs. Pamela bustled over several times to refill their cups and make sure they had everything they needed. "What will you do now?" Beckett asked as they finished their meal. "I do not know," Hannah admitted. "Find work, I suppose. Mrs. Pamela mentioned they might need help here at the hotel. I can cook and clean, mend, and so I will manage somehow." "And your homestead?" Hannah looked down at her empty plate. "I cannot go back there. Even if I could work the land alone, which I cannot, I do not think I could bear it. Too many ghosts." Beckett was quiet for a moment, then said, "I need to get back to the Riverside Ranch. Let them know I am alive. They probably think I died in the storm, but I will come back, check on you, make sure you are settled all right." "You do not have to do that," Hannah said, though part of her desperately hoped he would. "I want to," Beckett said simply. "You saved my life by letting me into your cabin. The least I can do is make sure you are taken care of." Over the next few weeks, Hannah settled into a new life in St. George. Mrs. Pamela did indeed need help at the hotel, and Hannah threw herself into the work with determination. She cleaned rooms, helped with cooking, mended linens, and gradually began to feel almost human again. The work was hard but satisfying, and the other women who worked at the hotel were kind, if curious about her story. The church community embraced her as well. The local congregation provided her with additional clothing and supplies, and several families invited her to Sunday dinners. Hannah appreciated their kindness but found it hard to connect. She felt hollowed out, like a shell of the person she had been before the fever took her family. Beckett returned after a week, as he had promised. He came to the hotel one evening after Hannah had finished her shift, looking travel-worn but smiling. "They were mighty surprised to see me," he said. "Thought I was a ghost at first. The foreman said I must have 9 lives to survive that storm." They went for a walk through town, talking easily about everything and nothing. Beckett told her about his work at the ranch, the other hands, the cattle they were raising. Hannah told him about her days at the hotel, the guests who came and went, the gossip she overheard. "You like it here?" he asked. "It is all right," Hannah said honestly. "Better than freezing to death, certainly, but I feel like I am just going through the motions, you know, like I am watching someone else live my life." "It has not been that long," Beckett said gently. "Grief takes time." "Everyone keeps saying that, but how much time? How long before I stop seeing their faces every time I close my eyes? How long before I can think about them without feeling like I am being torn apart?" Beckett stopped walking and turned to face her. "I do not know," he said. "But I do know you are stronger than you think. You survived when a lot of people would have given up. You are still standing, still fighting. That means something." His words touched something deep inside her, and Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. After that, Beckett made a habit of visiting St. George whenever his work allowed, which was every week or two. He would arrive in the evening and they would walk together or sit in the hotel parlor talking. Hannah found herself looking forward to these visits, found herself thinking about him during the long days at work. He made her feel less alone, less like she was drifting through life without purpose. Winter began to loosen its grip, as February turned to March. The snow melted, revealing the red earth and hardy plants that gave southern Utah its distinctive beauty. Hannah felt herself thawing along with the land, slowly coming back to life. The pain of her loss was still there, would probably always be there, but it no longer consumed every waking moment. One evening in late March, Beckett arrived with a proposition. They were sitting in the hotel parlor, the room empty except for them, when he said, "I have been thinking about what you said about feeling like you are going through the motions. What if you had something to work toward, a purpose?" "What do you mean?" Hannah asked. "The Riverside Ranch is expanding. The owner wants to build up the operation, maybe even start raising horses along with cattle. He is looking for people who are willing to work hard and learn. I talked to him about you, told him your story. He said if you are interested, there might be a place for you there." Hannah was surprised. "Doing what? I do not know anything about ranching." "You could learn. You are smart and capable. There is plenty of work. Cooking for the hands, helping with the horses, general ranch work. It would not be easy, but you would have a roof over your head, 3 meals a day, and a chance to build something new." "Why would you do this for me?" Hannah asked. Beckett met her eyes, and she saw something in them that made her heart beat faster. "Because I care about you," he said simply. "Because I think you deserve a chance at a new beginning. And because, if I am being honest, I like having you around. I look forward to seeing you. These past few months, getting to know you, it has meant a lot to me." Hannah felt her cheeks flush. She had been so focused on her grief, on just surviving day to day, that she had not allowed herself to think about what Beckett's attention might mean. But now, hearing him say these words, she realized that she cared about him too. More than cared. She had started to fall for this kind, steady man who had appeared in her darkest hour. "I like having you around too," she said softly. "You make me feel like maybe there is a future worth living for." Beckett reached across the space between them and took her hand. His palm was calloused from hard work, but his touch was gentle. "Come to the ranch," he said. "Give it a try. If you hate it, you can always come back here, but maybe, just maybe, it could be a new start for both of us." Hannah looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. It felt right, felt like something she had been missing without even knowing it. "All right," she said. "I will try." The decision made, things moved quickly. Mrs. Pamela was sorry to see Hannah go, but understood her reasons. The church ladies packed her a basket of food and gave her their blessings. A week later, Hannah climbed onto the seat of a wagon beside Beckett, her few belongings loaded in the back, and they set off for the Riverside Ranch. The journey took most of a day, following a rough track that wound through stunning red rock canyons and across high desert plains. Beckett pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the area, and Hannah drank in the beauty of the landscape. It was so different from the frozen wasteland she had left behind at her homestead, so full of color and life. The Riverside Ranch sprawled across a broad valley where a creek ran year-round, providing water for crops and livestock. The main house was a sturdy 2-story building made of adobe and wood, and around it clustered various outbuildings: a barn, a bunkhouse, a cookhouse, a smokehouse, and several storage sheds. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Hannah could see several men working with horses in a large corral. Beckett took her to meet the owner, a gruff but fair man named Mr. Douglas, who welcomed her and showed her to a small cabin that would be hers alone. It was simple, just one room with a bed, a table, a chair, and a small stove, but it was clean and solid, and Hannah felt something ease in her chest when she saw it. "You will eat your meals in the main cookhouse with everyone else," Mr. Douglas explained. "Beckett says you can cook, so we will start you there, helping our cook, Martha. She has been complaining about needing assistance, so you are an answer to her prayers. We will see how it goes and figure out other ways you can help as needed. Work hard, be honest, and you will do fine here." Hannah thanked him and got settled in, unpacking her meager belongings and making the space her own. That evening, she joined the ranch hands for dinner in the cookhouse, a long building with tables and benches where everyone gathered. There were about 15 men in total, ranging from young cowboys barely out of their teens to grizzled veterans with decades of experience. They were polite to Hannah, but clearly curious about the new arrival. Martha, the cook, was a broad woman in her 50s with gray hair and a booming laugh. She took one look at Hannah and said, "Finally, someone to help me feed these bottomless pits. Can you make biscuits, girl?" "Yes, madam," Hannah said. "Good. That is half the battle right there. Come on, I will show you where everything is." Working in the ranch cookhouse was nothing like cooking in her own small cabin had been. The scale was enormous. Giant pots of stew, dozens of biscuits at a time, whole sides of beef roasting over the fire. But Hannah found she enjoyed the challenge, enjoyed the satisfaction of seeing hungry men eat their fill and leave the table satisfied. She fell into a routine quickly. Up before dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast, then clean up, preparation for lunch, more clean up, then starting dinner. In between, there were vegetables to prepare, bread to bake, supplies to inventory, and 100 other small tasks. By the time she fell into bed each night, she was exhausted, but in a good way, the kind of tired that came from honest work. Beckett was always nearby, not hovering but present. He would stop by the cookhouse for meals, of course, but also at other times, offering to help carry heavy pots or chop wood for the stove. They would talk while they worked, easy conversations that gradually revealed more and more about each other. Hannah learned that Beckett had grown up on a small farm in Kansas, the youngest of 5 children. His father had died when he was 12, and he had left home at 15 to find work and send money back to his mother. He had drifted west, working various ranches, always saving his money but never quite sure what he was saving for. "I think I was waiting," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch of the cookhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "Waiting for something that felt right, felt like home. I think maybe I have found it here." Hannah understood what he meant, even if he did not say it directly. She was starting to feel it too, a sense that maybe this place, these people, could become her home. And more than that, the growing feelings she had for Beckett were becoming harder to ignore. She found herself watching for him during the day, felt her heart lift when she saw him, missed him when he was out on the range for days at a time. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch came alive with activity. Calves were born and branded, new horses were brought in and trained, fields were planted, and the work never seemed to end. Hannah expanded her role beyond the cookhouse, helping with the vegetable garden, learning to care for the chickens and milking cows, even assisting with the horses under Beckett's patient instruction. "You are a natural," he said one day as she successfully got a bridle on a young mare. "Some people are afraid of horses, but you just treat them like they are reasonable creatures who deserve respect." "That is because they are," Hannah said, stroking the mare's neck. "Just like people, you treat them right, they will treat you right." As the months passed, Hannah felt herself changing. The weight of grief that had pressed on her chest for so long began to lift, not disappearing entirely but becoming manageable. She laughed again, really laughed, at Martha's bawdy jokes and the antics of the younger cowboys. She sang while she worked, old hymns and folk songs that her mother had taught her. She began to think about the future not with dread but with cautious hope. The other ranch hands noticed the growing connection between Hannah and Beckett, and there was good-natured teasing. "When are you going to make an honest woman of her, Beckett?" One of the older cowboys called out during dinner one night, causing both of them to blush. But Beckett did not rush things, and Hannah appreciated that. They were building something real, something solid, and that took time. They went for walks in the evening when work was done, talking about everything under the sun. He held her hand, and later he put his arm around her shoulders. The first time he kissed her, under a sky full of stars in late July, it felt like coming home. "I love you," he said afterward, his forehead resting against hers. "I did not plan on it, did not see it coming, but I do. I love you, Hannah." "I love you too," she whispered back, and it was true. Somehow, in the midst of her darkest time, she had found light again. This man who had appeared during a blizzard, who had led her to safety and then given her space to heal, had won her heart completely. They were married in September, a simple ceremony in the small church in St. George with Mrs. Pamela and Martha, and the ranch hands in attendance. Hannah wore a dress that Martha and some of the church ladies had helped her make, a soft green that brought out her eyes. Beckett wore his best clothes and looked so handsome that Hannah felt her breath catch when she saw him waiting at the altar. The preacher spoke about new beginnings, about how God could bring good even out of the darkest circumstances, and Hannah felt tears stream down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of gratitude. She had survived, had found a way forward, had found love again. At the reception back at the ranch, Mr. Douglas made an announcement. "Beckett has been working for me for 3 years now, and he is one of the best hands I have ever had. I have been thinking about retirement, about passing this operation on to someone I trust. So I am making him foreman, with a share of the profits and the opportunity to buy into the ranch over time. And Hannah, you have proven yourself invaluable around here as well. Consider this place your home for as long as you want it." The celebration went late into the night, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Hannah danced with Beckett, with Mr. Douglas, with all the cowboys who lined up for their turn. She felt light, almost giddy with happiness, and when she caught Beckett's eye across the room, the look he gave her made her feel warm all over. That night, in the small cabin that they would share as husband and wife, Beckett held her close and said, "I meant what I told you that first day back in your cabin during the storm. This is your new beginning, our new beginning." Hannah kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. "I was ready to give up," she said. "The blizzard took everything from me, all my hope, all my reasons to keep going, and then you appeared." "I think we saved each other," Beckett said. "I was just drifting before I met you, not really living. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something that matters." They made love for the first time that night, a tender, passionate joining that left them both breathless and smiling. Afterward, lying in Beckett's arms, Hannah felt a peace she had not known since before Thomas died. She would always carry the love she had for her first family, would always grieve what had been lost, but she understood now that she could honor that love while also embracing this new chapter. Life at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Beckett thrived in his new role as foreman, and his ideas helped the ranch prosper. They expanded the horse breeding operation, which proved lucrative, and improved the irrigation system to maximize crop yields. Hannah continued to help in the cookhouse and with various other tasks, her competence and cheerful nature making her beloved by everyone on the ranch. In the spring of 1879, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of emotions, joy at the new life growing inside her, but also fear and grief as memories of her lost boys surfaced. Beckett held her as she cried, understanding without needing explanation, and promised that he would be with her every step of the way. "Whatever happens, we will face it together," he said. "You are not alone anymore." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Hannah bloomed with health. Martha fussed over her, making sure she ate enough and did not overwork herself. The ranch hands took over her heavier chores without being asked, and Mr. Douglas gave her a rocking chair he had ordered special from back east. On a cold January morning in 1880, almost exactly 2 years after that fateful blizzard, Hannah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Matthew Xavier, honoring both her lost husband and sons and the new life they were building. When Beckett held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face, Hannah felt her heart overflow with love. "Hello, little one," Beckett whispered. "Welcome to the world. Your mama and I have been waiting for you." Motherhood the second time was different from the first. Hannah could not help but be more anxious, more protective, but she tried not to let fear rule her. She nursed Thomas and sang to him and marveled at every milestone. His first smile, his first laugh, the first time he grabbed her finger and held on tight. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Mr. Douglas officially retired, selling his share to Beckett and moving to California to be near his daughter. Beckett proved to be a capable and fair owner, and the ranch hands respected him. He made Hannah a full partner in the operation, valuing her input and ideas, and together they built something truly impressive. 2 years later, Hannah gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, a name that felt appropriate given everything they had been through. Hope was a sunny, easy baby who rarely cried and seemed to find joy in everything. Thomas adored his little sister, and watching them play together filled Hannah with a contentment she had never thought she would feel again. More years passed, good years full of hard work and simple pleasures. They added a son, Daniel, and then another daughter, Grace. The small cabin was replaced with a proper house, built with love and care with enough room for their growing family. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in southern Utah Territory. Hannah sometimes thought about her first family, especially on quiet evenings when she sat on the porch watching the sunset. She had not forgotten them, would never forget them, but the pain had softened into a bittersweet ache. She had learned that the heart was big enough to hold multiple loves, that honoring the past did not mean rejecting the future. One evening in the summer of 1887, as she and Beckett sat on that porch watching their children play in the yard, Hannah said, "Do you remember what you said to me that day in my cabin? During the blizzard?" "I said a lot of things," Beckett replied, smiling. "You said you were thinking about all the things you wished you had done different. Do you still feel that way?" Beckett reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Not even a little bit. Every choice I made, every place I drifted to, it all led me to that cabin in the middle of a blizzard. It led me to you. I would not change a single thing." "I would not either," Hannah said. "Even the pain, even the loss, it all brought me here to this life with you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as Thomas, now 7 years old, carefully helped his younger siblings build something with sticks and string. Hope, 5, chattered constantly, her sunny disposition undimmed. Daniel, 3, toddled around trying to keep up with his older siblings, while baby Grace slept peacefully in a basket nearby. "We made it," Hannah said softly. "Through the blizzard, through the grief, through everything, we made it to the other side." "We did," Beckett agreed. "And we are just getting started." As the sun sank lower, painting the Utah sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Hannah felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had lost so much, had stood at the edge of despair ready to give up, but she had been given a second chance. The blizzard had taken her hope away, but this man beside her, this good, kind, steady man, had helped her find it again. She thought back to that moment when she had opened her cabin door to a stranger in a storm, never imagining how that single decision would change her life. She remembered the first time Beckett had looked at her with more than just compassion, the first time he had held her hand, the first time he had said he loved her. She remembered the birth of each of their children, the struggles they had overcome together, the life they had built from nothing. "What are you thinking about?" Beckett asked, squeezing her hand. "Everything," Hannah said. "The past, the present, the future. How lucky I am. How grateful I am that you knocked on my door that night." "I am the lucky one," Beckett said. "You let me in more ways than one. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything that matters." As darkness fell and they called the children inside for dinner, Hannah took one last look at the land spread out before her. This was home now, truly home, in a way that transcended place. It was the people, the love, the life they had created together. She had survived the worst thing she could imagine, had clawed her way back from the brink of despair, and had found something better than she had dared to hope for on the other side. The blizzard had taken everything from her, but it had also brought Beckett into her life. And he had been right, all those years ago when he had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to pray. He was her new beginning and she was his, and together they had built a future worth living. Inside the house, with her husband and children gathered around the dinner table, Hannah said a prayer of thanks. Not just for the food, though they had plenty, or for their health, though they were blessed with it, but for the journey that had brought them all to this moment. For the hard times that had taught her strength, for the grief that had taught her compassion, for the despair that had taught her the value of hope. And most of all, for the cowboy who had appeared in a blizzard and showed her that endings could also be beginnings, that loss could lead to love, that the darkest night eventually gave way to dawn. Years continued to roll by at the Riverside Ranch, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Thomas grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch work as much as his father did. He had Beckett's steady nature and Hannah's determination, and by the time he turned 16, he was handling responsibilities that would have overwhelmed men twice his age. Hope proved to have a gift with the horses, able to calm even the most skittish animals with her gentle touch and patient manner. Daniel showed an interest in the business side of things, keeping careful records and finding ways to improve efficiency. Little Grace, who grew into a bright and curious child, loved learning and devoured every book she could get her hands on. Hannah and Beckett watched their children grow with pride and joy. The house was always full of noise and activity, so different from that silent, frozen cabin where Hannah had nearly lost everything. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she would catch Beckett's eye across the dinner table or while they were working side by side, and the look they shared spoke volumes. They had built this together, had created a legacy that would outlast them both. The ranch continued to thrive under Beckett's leadership. He was respected throughout the territory as a fair employer and a shrewd businessman. He treated his workers well, paying them fairly and ensuring they had good living conditions. And in return, he earned their loyalty and hard work. Hannah was equally respected, known for her kindness and her willingness to help anyone in need. When other families in the area faced hardships, whether from drought or illness or financial troubles, Hannah and Beckett were always among the first to offer assistance. In 1889, tragedy struck when Martha, the beloved ranch cook who had become like a mother to Hannah, passed away peacefully in her sleep. The entire ranch mourned her loss, and Hannah felt the grief deeply. But she also felt grateful for the years they had shared, for the friendship and guidance Martha had provided. At the funeral, Hannah spoke about how Martha had welcomed her when she was lost and broken, had given her purpose and shown her that it was possible to build a new life after devastating loss. She taught me that family is not always about blood, Hannah said, her voice steady despite her tears. It is about the people who show up, who care, who make room in their lives and hearts for you. Martha did that for me, and I will never forget her. After Martha's death, Hannah took over running the cookhouse full-time, training younger women from the area who needed work. She thought Martha would have approved of that, of the way knowledge and opportunity were being passed on to the next generation. As Utah moved closer to statehood, the ranch adapted to changing times. The old ways of open-range cattle drives were giving way to more organized operations. Railroads were expanding, bringing both opportunities and competition. Beckett navigated these changes carefully, always thinking ahead and planning for the future. In 1895, when Thomas turned 16 and expressed interest in learning more about horse breeding beyond what the ranch offered, Beckett arranged for him to spend a year working with a renowned horse trainer in Colorado. It was hard to let their eldest child go, but both Hannah and Beckett understood the importance of education and experience. "We have to let them find their own way," Beckett said the night after Thomas left, as he held Hannah on the porch swing they had installed years ago. "Just like we found ours." "I know," Hannah said. "It does not make it easier, though." "Nothing about parenting is easy," Beckett replied, "but it is worth it. They are all worth it." Thomas returned a year later with new skills and ideas that he immediately put to work improving the ranch's horse breeding program. Hope, now 13, worked alongside her brother, her natural talent enhanced by his technical knowledge. Together, they developed a reputation for producing some of the finest horses in the territory. Daniel, at 11, had created a detailed accounting system that impressed even the bank managers in St. George. Grace, 9 years old, announced that she wanted to be a teacher and started helping the younger children of ranch workers with their reading and writing. Watching her children pursue their passions and develop their talents filled Hannah with a pride so intense it almost hurt. These beautiful, capable people had come from her, from the love she shared with Beckett. They were proof that life went on, that joy could follow sorrow, that hope could be reborn from ashes. One evening in the fall of 1896, as Hannah and Beckett celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary, they took a rare evening away from the ranch to have dinner at the hotel in St. George. Mrs. Pamela, now quite elderly but still running the place with an iron fist, fussed over them and insisted their meal was on the house. "I remember when you two arrived here," she said, her eyes misty with memory. "Half frozen, exhausted, and looking like you had been through hell itself. And now look at you, prosperous, happy, with a beautiful family. It does my heart good to see it." After dinner, Hannah and Beckett walked through the town, pointing out changes and reminiscing about that desperate winter when they had first arrived. The town had grown significantly, with new buildings and businesses, more people, more bustle and activity. But the essential character of the place remained the same: hardworking, close-knit, resilient. They walked to the edge of town and looked out at the darkening landscape, the red rocks turning purple in the fading light. Beckett put his arm around Hannah and pulled her close. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not gotten lost in that storm?" he asked. "Sometimes," Hannah admitted, "but I do not dwell on it. What matters is that you did get lost and you found me, and everything else followed from that. I was thinking today about what I said to you all those years ago, about being your new beginning. But the truth is, you were my new beginning too. You gave me a reason to stop drifting, to put down roots, to build something that mattered. Before you, I was just going through the motions, same as you were after you lost your first family." Hannah turned to face him fully, reaching up to touch his face. The years had added some lines around his eyes and threads of silver in his hair, but to her, he was as handsome as the day they married. More so, actually, because she knew him so deeply now, knew every facet of his character and loved all of it. "We saved each other," she said. "That is what people who love each other do." They kissed, a sweet, lingering kiss that still held all the passion and promise of their wedding day. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Let us go home," Beckett said. "To our children, our ranch, our life." "Yes," Hannah agreed. "Let us go home." The years that followed brought continued growth and change. Utah achieved statehood in 1896, and Beckett was asked to serve on the local council, helping to shape policies for the new state. He accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to give back to the community that had embraced them. Hannah became increasingly involved in helping other women who found themselves in difficult circumstances. She never forgot what it felt like to be alone and desperate, and she used her position and resources to make a difference. She helped establish a small school in the area, donated supplies to families in need, and provided employment opportunities on the ranch for women and young people who needed a fresh start. In 1900, Thomas married a young woman named Sarah, whom he had met through the horse breeding business. She was smart and capable, with a head for business that complemented Thomas's practical skills. Their wedding was a joyous affair, with seemingly half the territory in attendance, and Hannah cried happy tears as she watched her son pledge his life to the woman he loved. Thomas and Sarah built a house on the ranch property, and when their first child was born a year later, a boy they named Beckett Xavier, Hannah felt a profound sense of continuity. She was a grandmother now, a matriarch of a growing family that would carry forward the legacy she and Beckett had built. Hope remained unmarried, but seemed perfectly content with her life working with the horses. She had suitors, but none of them seemed to interest her as much as the ranch work did. Hannah did not push her, remembering her own journey and trusting that hope would find her path in her own time. Daniel, now 17, announced his intention to study business at a college back east. It was a bold move and an expensive one, but Beckett and Hannah supported it fully. They had worked hard to build something successful, and part of that success meant giving their children opportunities they themselves had never had. Grace, at 15, was still set on becoming a teacher. She had already started taking on more pupils, and her passion for education was evident in everything she did. She talked about opening a proper school someday, one that would serve all the children in the area regardless of their family's ability to pay. As Hannah watched her children grow and pursue their dreams, she felt a deep satisfaction. This was what she and Beckett had worked for, what they had built together, not just a successful ranch, but a family and a legacy that would endure. One warm summer evening in 1902, the entire extended family gathered for a celebration. It was the 20th anniversary of Hannah and Beckett's wedding, and Thomas and Sarah had organized a party that brought together ranch hands past and present, friends from St. George and beyond, and family members from near and far. Tables were set up in the yard, groaning under the weight of food. Lanterns were strung from the trees, creating a magical glow as the sun set. Music filled the air, and people danced and laughed and celebrated. Hannah stood on the porch of the big house, watching the festivities with Beckett at her side. Their grandson, little Beckett, now almost 2 years old, was running around with other children, his laughter ringing out clearly. Sarah was pregnant again, glowing with health and happiness. Hope was showing some visitors the horses, her face animated as she talked about their lineage and training. Daniel was home for the summer before returning to college, and he was deep in conversation with some of the ranch hands about improvements they could make. Grace was helping serve food, chatting easily with everyone, her warm personality making people smile. "We did good," Beckett said softly, echoing the words he had said so many times over the years. "We did," Hannah agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible." She thought back to that desperate woman standing in front of 3 crosses in a blizzard, so lost and hopeless that she could barely see a reason to continue. If someone had told her then that 20 years later she would be standing here, surrounded by love and family and success, she never would have believed it. The journey from there to here seemed impossible, and yet she had lived every day of it. "Thank you," she said to Beckett, as she had said countless times before. "For what?" he asked, also as he had countless times before. "For knocking on my door, for not giving up on me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for opening that door," Beckett replied. "Thank you for taking a chance on a half-frozen cowboy who did not have sense enough to avoid a blizzard. Thank you for loving me back, for giving me a family, for making me happier than I ever thought possible." They kissed, not caring who might see, and the people nearby who noticed smiled and looked away, giving them a moment of privacy. The party went late into the night, with stories and toasts and more laughter than seemed possible. Person after person stood up to say what Hannah and Beckett meant to them, to thank them for their generosity and kindness, to celebrate the life they had built together. When it was finally over, and the last guests had departed or found places to sleep, Hannah and Beckett walked slowly back to their house. They were both exhausted but happy, the good kind of tired that comes from a day well spent. In their bedroom, as they prepared for sleep, Hannah caught sight of herself in the mirror. She was 47 now, no longer the young woman who had struggled to survive that harsh winter. Her face showed the marks of time and experience, lines around her eyes and mouth, silver threading through her brown hair. But her eyes were bright and alive in a way they had not been for a long time after she lost her first family. She was happy. Despite everything she had been through, despite the losses and the pain, she was genuinely, deeply happy. She had a husband she adored who adored her back, children and grandchildren who brought her joy, work that gave her purpose, and a community where she belonged. "What are you thinking about?" Beckett asked, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "How far we have come," Hannah said. "How much has changed. How grateful I am for all of it. Even the hard parts, even those," Hannah said. "Because the hard parts taught me things I needed to know. They made me stronger, made me appreciate what I have now." They stood there together for a moment, looking at their reflection. A middle-aged couple, still strong and capable, still deeply in love, still building their life together one day at a time. The next morning, life returned to its usual rhythm. There was work to be done, always work, but it was good work that meant something. Hannah rose early and made breakfast for the family, then spent the morning working in her garden. The afternoon was devoted to going over accounts with Daniel, who would be leaving for college again soon. In the evening, she and Beckett took their usual walk around the ranch, checking on things and simply enjoying each other's company. This was her life now. Full, rich, meaningful. The grief for what she had lost would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had learned to carry it alongside her joy, to honor the past while embracing the present and looking forward to the future. Time continued its relentless march forward. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new life and energy. Thomas and Sarah had 4 children in total, and Hope eventually married a quiet rancher from a neighboring property, surprising everyone but seeming quite content with her choice. Daniel graduated from college with honors and returned to help expand the ranch's business interests. Grace opened her school and quickly gained a reputation as an exceptional teacher, Hannah and Beckett grew older together, gracefully aging into their roles as the family's foundation. They still worked, though not as hard as they once had, gradually turning over more responsibilities to their children and grandchildren. They still took their evening walks, still sat on the porch swing and watched the sunset, still held hands and told each other, "I love you," every single day. In the spring of 1910, as they celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary, Hannah reflected on everything that had brought them to this moment. She was 55 now, Beckett 58, and they had built something that would last long after they were gone. "You have any regrets?" she asked Beckett one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. He thought about it for a long moment before answering. "No," he said finally, "not a single one. Every choice I made, good or bad, led me to you and to this life. How could I regret any of that?" "I feel the same way," Hannah said. "Even losing Thomas and the boys, as painful as it was, led me here. I would not wish that pain on anyone, and I still miss them, but I cannot regret the path that brought me to you." "They would be proud of you," Beckett said gently. "Proud of how you survived, how you built a new life, how you raised our children to be good people." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude and love and profound peace. She had made it through the darkness and found the light on the other side. She had survived the blizzard that took everything from her, and found a new beginning in the arms of a cowboy who appeared when she needed him most. "I love you," she said to Beckett, as she had said thousands of times before and would say thousands of times more. "I love you too," he replied, pulling her close. "Always have, always will." As the sun set over the ranch they had built together, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and red, Hannah felt complete. Her story, which had seemed to end in that frozen cabin so many years ago, had instead been given a new chapter. A chapter full of love and family and purpose. A chapter that proved endings could be beginnings, that hope could be reborn, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. The blizzard had taken her hope away, but the cowboy had given it back. And together they had built a life worth living, a legacy worth leaving, a love story worth telling. And that, Hannah thought as she rested her head on her husband's shoulder, was more than enough.